I grew up in Montreal, and very early on, it seemed to me that there was something missing in piano technique as we understand it today. You had the amazing example of Horowitz, whom I heard live 4 times in my life. They were like life-altering experiences. And his sound was amazing, his expression was amazing, but also his physical organization was quite unique and quite striking. And I started thinking, could there be a link between the way he looks as he plays and the sound that's coming out of the instrument? So I started investigating physical organization, first through Tai Chi. I've done Tai Chi now for 40 years, and the movements are very, very slow, but they're not just circular. You never just push somebody. You move your center, and then the energy comes out from the center and through the arm. And the push is much more powerful when you don't put any effort into it, but simply let the energy come out from the center. The bones have to be extremely well aligned for that to work well. And also in Montreal, I studied under Phil Cohen, who, to my mind, was the Moshe Feldenkrais of the piano world. He was a genius who also is fascinated by this whole relationship of physical organization to sound and artistry. And he has studied with Yvonne Hubert, who produced many of Canada's greatest pianists, and she was a student of Alfred Cortot. Now, Cortot taught, one of the things that he taught, which is not unique to his teaching, but striking in his teaching, is that the arm links notes, whereas the fingers produce the notes. This is in contrast to the weighted touch, where the arm is brought in on every single key. So we'll have more about that afterwards, and we're going to see which of those 2 touches actually relates better to the idea of biotensegrity. So I worked with Phil for several years, and I was playing better, but I had no idea what he was doing to make me play better. He was moving my arm and the sound. I was completely confused. So then I discovered Feldenkrais method, a method of neuromotor re-education, which teaches the brain how to better align the bones by sensation. If we do a strong movement, we won't learn anything, but when we slow down the movements and make them softer, less effortful, and a smaller range, the brain starts to pick up on little parasitic contractions, muscular contractions that have no use. And it can begin to sense that it's doing that and change them. And so again, the skeleton takes over the work of the muscles, just as in Tai Chi. So synchronicity stepped in at this point. By this time, I had decided to do a Feldenkrais training in order to develop a new approach to piano technique. I had no idea how that would work. And 2 weeks before my training started, Kemal Gekic walked out on stage at the Montreal International Piano Competition, sat down, played, and I said, that's it. His organization was like Horowitz's, the sound was like Horowitz's, the critics all said he's another Horowitz. And I immediately went backstage and told him, listen, nobody plays like that here, nobody can teach me how to play like that here. He says, come to Yugoslavia to study with me, but come soon. He's going to be a war, and get there before it starts. That's one of the more interesting invitations I've received, sure. So I went in 1990, and we started working. He was rebuilding my technique from the ground up. I was understanding what he's doing in terms of Feldenkrais, and beginning to write articles about it. Eventually, the book came out in 2003, The Craft of Piano Playing, the DVD, by the way, Roman and Littlefield, which are here today, the publishers for The Craft of Piano Playing. Then a DVD in 2006, 2 more books in 2010 and 2012, which are here. And things were going pretty good. But at that point, I was still aware of the hand structure, this wonderful structure, this arch structure. The hand was designed to grasp. Draw your thumb across the fingers, straight. Keep everything straight and draw the fingers across. Now, curl them just a little bit, curl the thumb a little bit, and try to draw them across the same, so the thumb touches the underside of the fingers. It very quickly becomes virtually impossible. Straighten it again, and So when we're curling the fingers, we're using the fine motor control in the distal phalange and the medial phalange. But when they're straight, we're availing ourselves of the main powerhouse of the hand, which is the lumbar interosseous muscles in this top joint. So if you stand that structure up and lean into it, and you feel its structure, an arch gets stronger the more weight you put on the keystone. But we're going to discover why, because it's actually a tensegrity structure. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I was still more focused on the function, on the structure, than the function of that structure. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, in Washington, D.C., an orthopedic surgeon named Stephen Levin was practicing and repairing knees, repairing shoulders, doing spine surgery, this and that. But he, already in medical school, he told me recently that Grant's Anatomy, one of his anatomy books, asked certain questions that they didn't really answer very well in med school. Now, the classical view of anatomy is that the spine is like a stack of bricks. So you stack one on top of the other, and then it's like a skyscraper, like a structure that can carry you around. And he said, wait a minute. Like, if you pull the foundation out from underneath the skyscraper, even a little bit, it falls over. It very quickly loses its stability, but we are eminently capable of reestablishing stability no matter how we move, where we move, with what amount of force we move. Within limits, of course. So he's thinking about these and wondering, but he couldn't find a way to express his concerns and his suspicions that there was another type of organization within the human body, and also in all living beings, actually, who have a skeleton and muscles and nerves. Then one day, he's at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, and in front of that, there's a sculpture. This is a sculpture by Ken Snelson, and it's called a Tensegrity sculpture. It was named that by Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller created the geodesic dome, the dome which is constructed of very thin struts which bear surprising amounts of weight given their size. But it's because of the way they're put together. Snelson got very, very clever and started creating these structures where none of the struts touch. And Fuller saw these and said, oh, that's a tensegrity structure. It's got tensile strength, which gives it structural integrity. So you can see this one is a model of the pelvis, and none of the struts are touching, and yet it stands up. Even if I angle it this way or that way, it very quickly springs back to a standing position, and if you put it sideways, it sort of bends. Now, these ones are not the best tensegrity models because they're made with elastics, and a closer approximation of tensegrity structures can be made with wires, where there's even less give. But these are all I could come up with, so this is what we're going to have today. There's the Hirshhorn Museum, and if you stand under that thing, you can hear it quietly humming. It has energy. So Stephen Levin sees this thing and says, that's it. That's the model for the human body. Then he goes back to his operating room, and he's discovering that, yes, indeed, the classical model says that the discs in the spine and the synovial fluid keep the joints from touching, and the fascia, the connective tissue, the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, the fascia covering, even cartilage to a certain point, hold things together. In this model, the fascia also conspires to hold the bones apart, which is exactly what we see in these tensegrity models. So, and another indication that perhaps the human spine is not a stack of bones or a stack of bricks is that all spines originally started as horizontal spines. And the human spine is actually an ingenious adaptation to verticality. So movement and transmitting movement through a rippling kind of structure is the spine's primary function, even though it is structural. Now here's a tensegrity vertebra. So we've taken away the bulk of the vertebra so you can see the tensile relationships between one and the next, and you see how complex it is. And this is a model of the spine with the bulk of the vertebra put back in, but you can see that there's a disc between each vertebra, but these pieces of wood are not compressing on the disc. They are kept from compressing on each one of these discs by the tensegrity arrangement. Here's a model of a tensegrity spine complete with all 24 vertebrae going from the bottom one, L5, up to the top one, C1. And here's a knee. Now, Levin was he really wanted to, some guy, I guess the guy agreed to do this beforehand, because he's on the operating table, he's awake, it's local anesthetic, his knee is wide open. Levin is fixing his knee up, and he says, could you just get off the operating table and come over to the wall? With an open knee. They got him over, and they said, okay, now compress the knee, compress the knee. And he went, and even with it wide open, he could not touch the two bones, the femur and the tibia fibula, because all the fascia is so strongly holding it apart like a true tensegrity. Levin was running down the hospital corridors. It's true, it's true. Here's a tensegrity pelvis. So I wouldn't advise trying this now, but if you're lying down, somebody takes your iliac crest and pushes them together, you can actually make them approach. There's movement through the sacroiliac joint, and again, there's all the most powerful muscles in the body are attached to the pelvis, but it's a tensegrity structure that they're attached to, not simply a lever structure. What's the difference between a lever structure and, because I talk a lot about levers. This is like a simple lever, and the piano key is a simple lever. So the difference between that and a tensegrity approach is that the lever, so-called lever, is actually just one part of a kinematic chain. Now, those of you who are familiar with Barbara Conwell and body mapping know all about kinematic chains, because she's the one who made that, who popularized that term. And it's a very elegant way of expressing how even if I move one finger in a certain way, that movement will actually ripple through the whole body. So it looks like a lever, but it's functioning like one element in a kinematic chain. And if movement is blocked anywhere in the kinematic chain, it becomes dysfunctional. So for the kinematic chain to function as such, the movement has to go all the way through. So you see here are tensegrity models of the entire human body. And here's a walking tensegrity torso. Now, the trouble with this is that it looks a little bit like a puppet, but it's actually functioning different from a puppet because it's actually a very elegant representation of how we walk. Let's see. Is he going to go all the way down? Because I can't do that. Oh, thank God. Whoa, I can't do that one either. So, but try and imagine yourself. I am a tensegrity. I am one of these. While you're sitting, while you're walking, while you're standing, while you're playing, which we're going to get to. Here's another one. So if it's a stack of bricks, could it do this? There's actually a guy hidden behind manipulating this thing. It's a model of a spine. So look again, look at the tremendous extension you can get. Look at the tremendous side bending you can get. You can get more side bending. Yesterday, Paola and who else they were side bending like this. But if you actually, when I go to the left, if I put my weight on my left leg, I'm going to fall over. So I'm already holding myself from falling over. I'm going to bend to the left and put the weight onto my right. Look how much more side bending I get. Because there's no holding through the torso. I'm respecting the tensegrity nature of my body. Let's go. Oh, is this guy a stack of bricks or a tensegrity? This is the Russian guy who works for the Cirque du Soleil. So please play with these. While we're talking about it, you should be experiencing it. You can even throw them, but watch out. You can catch it. It's very light. They're easy to catch, but if one of the sticks goes in your eyes, then you're in trouble. Let's try it. Good for you. You see, it collapses, but it comes right out again. Now, oh, by the way, Jean here, we're staying at the same Airbnb, and she helped put some of these together last night. Thank you, Jean. Don't blame me. Exactly. Now, the interesting thing about this structure is that if you squeeze a balloon, then you squeeze the balloon here, and it gets larger over there. But look, if you squeeze these two sticks here, all of the sticks approach one another. And if I pull the sticks apart, all of the sticks go apart. So it's now in tensegrity terms, the sticks are compression elements and the wires are tension elements. But they're not talking about tension in terms of bad tension, like what we feel as tension. They're talking about elevated elastic loading.
We have one this way.
Oh no! Oh my God! My baby! They're easy to put back together. And these ones have caps so that doesn't happen. This little model here that came with no caps, so this was happening to us continuously last night, so don't worry about it. Oh, it happened over here too. Yeah. So if you imagine that these are the bones and these are the muscles, then and then you imagine in the middle of every muscle there's a turnbuckle. And a turnbuckle is just going to ramp up the amount of tension. But remember, it's muscular tonus. It's only tension in the anatomical things when it blocks movement. So muscular tonus, raised muscular tonus, is going to ripple through the entire tensegrity structure. So I forgot the name of the lady, the wonderful lady who gave the vocal thing on Saturday morning.
Rachel.
Thank you. Rachel did this wonderful thing about the diaphragm going down. So when the diaphragm moves down to expand your lungs, the lungs expand in every direction. Then the diaphragm comes back up again. And then it's not like a balloon, which you squeeze it one place it gets larger than another place. It's like a tensegrity structure. Anybody else do you want to pass this back? Great. Now, now look at this, the core muscles rippling out to the periphery. This is called surf skiing. Watch that, look at his back. And look at the mobility through the entire spine and how is the spine powering the arms, powering the periphery. And can you imagine not moving like that when you play the piano, but having the availability of that kind of movement through your back when you're playing the piano? So, back to the amazing arches of the hand. There are 4 arches in the hand. Maybe I won't point them, I'll do them here. So the classic Russian arch is from fingertip up to the metacarpal phalangeal joint down to the wrist. The transverse arch, which is in all the anatomy books, comes across from the 5th metacarpal phalangeal over to the 2nd and down to the thumb. The Roman arch, which I kind of coined, 2nd finger across and down the thumb. I think this is a separate arch, but it's called Roman because it doesn't have a keystone. It's got a lintel across the top. And then the wrist is an actual arch. The 8 bones of the wrist are not flat, they're actually slightly arched. So Now, tensegrity structures are even now being conceived, they dug a tunnel under the Matterhorn. And the way tunnels have always been built is that the concrete arch in the tunnel has to bear the entire weight of the mountain. And it's a lot of concrete. And somebody came along and said, wait a minute, this is a tensegrity. The keystone of the arch gets stronger when you press on it because there's ground reactive forces coming back up. And they reduce the amount of concrete they use in the tunnel by about 80%, and the tunnel is actually stronger. So these four arches, if they function mechanically and I bear down on them and I make them stiff, then I've still got a good structure, but it's not very useful. But if I think of it as a tensegrity, so let's pretend this is a hand tensegrity. And I'm going to press down on it, but it's coming back up. And so it has structural integrity without moving any of its movement capabilities. So as we said before, grasp like this, turn it over, and there's the arch. So we need to bring the power of the arch to piano playing if we want to bring biotensegrity to piano playing. So because of Feldenkrais, I figured out, oh, this thing is like a little mini body with an ankle, and a knee, and a hip joint, and the hand itself being the pelvis, and the forearm being the torso. Now, if this thing starts to walk, if I really transfer the weight from one note to the next smoothly, then I'm walking as we do. If I feel the weight of my arm, the weight of my arm, the weight of my arm, well, that would be like feeling the weight of my torso. Oh, yeah. Nobody walks like that. And although it connects you to the keyboard, there's the danger of cutting the musical line. So we're going to relax and lie down in the keyboard. We're going to do it underneath the keyboard, but it's not an inner dead relaxation. It's a relaxation that brings us to the point of neutrality. The point of neutrality in the Feldenkrais terms, ergonomic terms, is the point at which the greatest amount of kinetic energy is available. So if I'm sitting neutral, Feldenkrais used to say, you can pull this bench from out from me and I won't fall over. There you go. You can pull it out and it doesn't matter. And so could we come to the keyboard? So I don't know, many people know that I've kind of been dissing arm wave technique for decades now. And I've created a lot of enemies. And I'm sad about that because I think the more I look at it, and you'll see today as we go on in this discussion, the more I see that they were doing the right thing, and then you just alter it a little bit, and then it becomes a caricature itself. So weight technique per se may not be bad. Some of the greats that we're going to hear use it like extensively, but how? And what I want to get to today is that if you use weight technique in the context of experiencing yourself as a biotensegrity entity, then you'll be home free and you'll be able to play as musically and pain-free as you like. That's the thesis. So there's something about elasticity. Okay, I have to stop this. Okay. So we think that movement is created by contracting muscles. But there's another way of creating movement, which is where the muscle remains contracted and then it gets elastically loaded a little more and a little less, and a little more and a little less. So this video shows how the calf muscle, when it's loaded enough, it provides 50% of the energy for running. And it's free energy because you don't have to actually make an exertion to recontract the muscle. If I'm jogging like this, I'm using mainly muscular contraction in my calves, and now 3 times faster is not 3 times more difficult. It's actually a lot easier. And so you'll see why that is in this clip. The video's not working. Oh, it is.
The spring stimulates shock also, as well as reduces the muscular work requirement. Think about jumping rope or watching an animal hopping. Thus effectively loading the spring in the proper depth. The more powerful the downward force, the better the elastic return.
here's a pianist who exemplifies that. Kemal Gekic. He pulls his fingers back, loading the lumbrical muscle and then letting it go. It's elastic energy, it's free. And it's ebullient, effervescent. By the way, that's Bruno Mont-Saint-Jean playing viola on the left, on the right. I'm dyslexic. Bruno Mont-Saint-Jean, famous film director, who did Richter, Enigma, and all these things. Yeah. So the weight technique says drop the arms into the key. Weight technique says relax. Now look at her metacarpal phalangeal joint, which we've established is the keystone of the arch. So the emptying out of the center of the hand and raising the wrist creates an inversion. So I can't walk if my knees are higher than my hip joint, right? So if things are upside down, they're functionally in disarray. Now, this is an interesting thing. Why did this happen? Why have we come to a caricature of arming instead of the way it was done by the greats of the past, Rubinstein, Rao, and many others? One theory I have is that, this is just a theory, I'm just putting it out here as a proposal, is that we don't walk the way we did 100 years ago. We don't move the way we did 100 years ago. So you're going to see in this video from 1907 that they're sailing along. They're sailing along, and you see that they're floating, actually. And so the legs fold and unfold. The pelvis, there's a subtle three-dimensional movement in the pelvis, which you don't see, but it's there, and the shoulders are free. And they're vertical but floating, not held vertical. Take a look. The guy, there's going to be a guy in a minute coming towards us. Yeah, this one. Look how he's sauntering. And it's so well organized. It looks like he's had 1,000 Feldenkrais lessons. So now, how do we walk today? Well, it's not quite the same. You're going to see here, let's just stop for a second. You're going to see people walking and thrusting their hips forward. Or high heels, there are going to be high heels here in a second, and with the back, totally sway back, with the caricature of sit up straight. You're going to be walking with intense purpose. I'm going to get there no matter what. Walk to do. Walk to do. You're going to see all sorts of things, but you don't see what we saw in the last clip. Where is she? Here she is. The high heels. Yeah, and it's also with some you see, she's sort of held in the chest, Some of them walk pretty good, but more often you'll see just some sort of constriction somewhere through the torso or through the hips. So I think there's been a real change. We sit in chairs, we drive cars. This guy here, look, he's just... So I think that's one possible reason why we've changed. But look at this. I'm glad Alan is here to see this. It's like that spine is a tower. And if I did arm weight technique with my arm really hanging from a tensegrity tower, when I got to the bottom, I would not fall into the key. I would not compress the key. I would land as light as a cat. And you see something of that. And this, I didn't understand this image for a long time because I thought, oh my God, he's stiffly held back. And now I see it. It's a tensegrity. It's free. He's floating. And he has absolute control of what he's doing with the keyboard. Now Horowitz, he looks like he's tensely held forward, but this is also a tensegrity. It reminds me a little bit of the Olympic Stadium in Montreal, where you see it's structurally sound even though the angles are somewhat unusual. Now, the piano action is not a simple lever. Look at how complex this thing is. I was presenting at a conference with a bunch of physicists and engineers, and they told me that when they really took a look at this thing, they figured it's one of the most complex mechanisms they've ever come across. They were really like, oh my God, this is... It just occurred to me that perhaps this is a sophisticated imitation of a tensegrity, where the hammer and the key are elements in a kinematic chain rather than being a simple lever. And that's why we feel we have such control over the key. But if we fall into that key and key bed, that is stand on the bottom, we lose all that control. So the idea is not to stand on a key, not to press the key, but stand up. Now if I want a forte, stand up quicker. Now I've heard several really great pianists in Belgrade. I'm from Belgrade, Serbia, and they all, without an exception, in their loud playing, they've succumbed to their teaching, our tradition, and there was a certain element of fall in their loud playing, which, to my mind, inhibited a really flowing phrase. Their soft playing was beautiful. Their passage work was amazing. I give my right arm to have 16 notes like that. And then it goes to loud and boom, boom. Even with the best of intentions. Many times I managed to forget about it because their musical intentions were so great that you could really experience what they wanted to do musically. But the technique was hampering the full sounding of their musical intentions. This is a different story. I'm hoping we can hear this. It's floating. The music is floating, and I believe he's floating too. And does anybody notice this is an unbelievable expression of rubato? His left hand seems to be continually going faster than the right. And yet they stay together. It's a tour de force. We're going to have to go on, sorry. Now, so biotensegrity, pianistic. This idea of the hand is unique by an artist in Novi Sad, Serbia, who's come up with Andy Harry. And this is, so we're bringing a little personality to our hand. And Feldenkrais does lessons for the whole body, and I've just developed a series of Feldenkrais lessons for the hand. So we're going to do them together now. We all, as babies, we did not walk for a year. Nobody learned to walk by walking. We laid down, we extended, we rolled over. We learned a myriad of movement components which are necessary simply to stand up. Now, the interesting thing is, do you know how much time it takes once we've stood up at age 1 for adult walking, the organization of adult walking, to develop? Anybody? How much time? How many years, let's say? Any ideas?
For adult walking?
Adult walking, the way adults walk.
After they learn to stand up.
After they learn to stand up.
12.
What?
12.
Does somebody say 12? Actually, it's 6.
Yeah, I was going to say 6.
Most people say 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, but at age 7, because look, this hip is higher and is more forward and is more to the side. Now this hip is higher, more forward, and more to the side. So if I'm walking, there's actually a 3-dimensional figure 8, flattened out figure 8, an infinity sign happening in the pelvis. So we tend to play the piano and stand up and walk the first day. What if we had a kind of a pianistic freestanding apprenticeship where we could teach the hand flexion and extension and rotation and all the things it needs to do, so that when it did stand up and walk, it did not do so with struggle against itself or with a sense of weightedness, but simply a sense of being a tensegrity structure, being able to breathe like that tensegrity structure breathes. So let's in here. let's go through. So now we're going to, would you please do this with only one hand, because at the end I'd like you to feel the difference between the hand that did these exercises and one that didn't. So if you please simply put the hand on the side and very gently, don't strain, very gently raise the fingers and then put them back down again. And you could bobsled, you could actually slide the hand as you raise the fingers and then slide the hand back as you lower them again. And the fingers remain totally flat. They hyperextend and then they get totally flat and hyperextend and totally flat. So do it so gently that you feel a gentle stretch in here. It's like look what you do before you run. Stretch up the hamstrings. And this is working the extensors. The extensors have to work in counterplay. It's not just about curling and flexing the fingers. Once a finger flexes, it has to come back up. Runners, when you push off with your hamstring, then keep doing it. Then the quadriceps brings the knee forward for the next push. And runners actually train the quadriceps more than they train the hamstrings. Now, let's roll. So would you please leave the hand there and now begin to roll it, but let it be very heavy. This is not the flopping onto the piano that many of us did. This is, you start off flopped and then you roll. So it's flop and roll. Flop and roll. And just see how the bones tend to fold a little and unfold, and each finger rotates individually, and the wrist rotates, and the hand kind of gets malleable. And you realize that this hand here with its 4 metacarpal bones is not solid. It's hard to do to oneself. When you have a friend, you can actually move the 2 metacarpal bones in relation to each other. This rolling awakens the hand's capacity to fold in on itself. Now, when the baby begins to draw up the knee, differentiate, we differentiate the thumb from the hand. Now, the thumb is a very strange digit. I wrote a whole book about it over there. And so we said it opposes, but here we're going to reverse oppose. So you start with the thumb touching the fingers, and then you move the thumb away like that. But if the thumb is standing on the leg, then, oh my God, it's standing my hand up. Oh, it's standing my hand up. And if you could do it like this, it's nice, but if you allow your body to... You just became a tensegrity. If I do this, I'm not a tensegrity. If I do this, then every part of myself participating in that standing of the thumb. And you feel how these muscles here are working way more than they used to. Now, this is not strain. This is muscles that are dormant, which should be participating in carrying the hand. Later on, we'll do stuff like this. But for now, just the first basic differentiation between the thumb. And now stand up a little bit and keep the fingers loose while the thumb stays. See, as soon as you stand, as soon as you start raising the fingers, the thumb muscles fall down. Or if it doesn't fall down, then how can I wiggle the fingers? But differentiation means it's a functional differentiation. The thumb can stand while the fingers are completely free and the thumb does not lose any of its functional security. Please, the differentiation of the toes, another important step. Would you please put your hand on the side and pretend the fingertips are glued to the thigh, and you slide the palm forward, and the fingers experience curling with none of the physical effort associated with curling. And now you slide back and you experience uncurling with none of the physical effort. So just slide the hand and watch your fingers curl and uncurl, and sense how different an experience this is. This is great for anybody with a tendinitis, carpal tunnel syndrome, because the brain is now experiencing the curling and uncurling of the skeleton of the finger without any muscular interference. It gets a clearer sense of it. All of a sudden, oh, this bone folds into that one. This bone, this bone. It senses the exact alignments. And it begins to send different signals to the motor nerves the next time you actually want to curl the finger. Now, let's do another roll, but this time put the fingers to the outside and roll over until the hand is lying on the Roman arch. Remember that Roman arch I talked to you about? down on the second finger and the thumb on the back of it. Just lie down in this thing. And then come to stand on the rolling arch. And then lie down on the rolling arch. And then come to stand on the rolling arch. And again, do it with your whole body. Okay? That's not grumpy. And now, when is the last time any one of us ever sat like that? Whoa! He's enjoying himself. It's comfortable. It's a pig, and we won't say what. Yeah. So, would you please? Oh, look! I'm wearing the same jacket. So just put your hand like that. Just stand the metacarpal bones vertically with the fingers flat. Just feel the structurality of it. Again, when I really feel the structure of these bones here standing, and my shoulder lets go. Oh, that's interesting. And now maybe turn it around this way, and then you can kind of fold and unfold it. Lean back, and then come back to sitting. And I don't mean lean back with your body. I mean lean back with your hand body.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean allow your body to follow the hand. See, but I'm going more sideways. I'm not going back. So you see again, this is sitting. And now, sit up like this with your hand, make that 90-degree angle there, and then turn it over, and there you have it. That's the hand on key. And this, I gotta explain this. This hand arch is the voice of the piano. Now, not stiffly, but functionally. Now, darn, her name's not Audrey, Jane, Saturday morning. Rachel. Oh, hard to get home. Okay, Rachel, she had these wonderful pictures of the vocal cords, and like if there's any air, then you get a raspy voice, and if the vocal cords are really like that, then you get this amazingly resonant voice. So to my mind, the hand without an arch is kind of like this voice, and the hand with an arch is this voice, and then the arch, and the little arch, and the arch, and the arch, and that. So you feel, as opposed to, you're just, when I stand up, I have more capacity for individuation. I actually have 3 voices. I have this one, this one, this one, this one. Even if they're simultaneous, the fingers, because they're not under duress, they actually manage to voice those 3 elements of the chord individually. If I fall into it, it's a homogeneous sound. It's not bad, but it's homogeneous. This is differentiated, okay? And you get more of the voice of the piano when you have this stand-up function available to you. I was going to say something else about it, I just went right out of my head. Oh! Well, there are many roads to Rome, and there are many intermediate steps to standing. So would you please put the hand on the side again and draw the fingertip towards the thumb tip without curling anything. Create an A-frame. And do it a few times and feel how, put your other hand up here, and feel what's going on in your shoulder when you do that. Does anybody not feel the shoulder working? Yeah, everybody feels it working. It's because you're a tensegrity. Because this kind of thing is going on. Oh no! I just broke that one. Yeah. So now we're going to take the arch out to an octave. So put your hands sideways. Maybe you could do it like this, and then. So if the thumb goes like that, if it's attached to something, the hand extends. But this is an extension, which is not a stretch. This is not a stretch. This is simply using the biotensegrity elements of the hand, where the elasticity of the muscles and the alignment of the bones conspire. And then once you've got your octave arch, you draw the middle of the arch up like this. You try to do this, but because the hand is on key or on knee, the arch comes up. Heinrich Neuhaus writes it on page 125 of The Art of Piano Playing, that the hand in an octave needs to be in a hoop shape. He doesn't talk so much about the functionality of the hoop shape, about maintaining movement within the hoop shape, but he does at least talk about it, that don't let it drop down. This is a weird one. There's a, what yoga posture is where you're like a bridge? Is it called a bridge or is it something else? Yeah. What? Upward dog? Yeah. Okay, do an upward dog. So again, put the hand on the back and try to shove the metacarpal phalangeal joint forward. And again, you're working the extensors and giving a nice stretch through here, but it's a functional stretch. We're not straining anything. We're feeling how that ripples all the way through, and I feel it all the way to my sits bone. Okay. If you're still doing all of these with only one hand, this is a refined thumb stand where now you're like a rearing horse, and you allow the fingers to curl. And the thumb, of course, is the back legs of the horse, and the fingers are the front legs of the horse. There's no end to how much empowerment we can gain through the individualization of the thumb. Yeah, and then the hand, we can also lie the hand back down in an octave and put the palm down, and then just very gently, slightly curl. Again, feeling how it ripples all the way up through my arm, into the shoulder, into the back. So all these were not isolated hand exercises. Every one of them linked the hand back into the body in a way which respects our biotensegrity nature. Now, oh, we can't hear it. I'm so upset. This is a Russian lady, Irina Lankova, and watch her movements. Because she's a wonderful musician, very, very poetic. And you see she's letting the arm fall into the key sometime, or compressing down. I know, that's what I wanted to say. I remember. I'll stop it for a second. So we've talked a lot about this keystone of the arch, and how it's so crucial, and how the lumbrical interosseous has to have a strong contraction. It really needs to know what it's doing. Now, but functionally speaking, if I play a note and that contraction happens a split second, a thousandth of a second after the sound, it means that that contraction is holding my hand in a shape. Now, the same contraction, a thousandth of a second before the sound, it moves the sound. It creates the sound. And the contraction happens, but there will be no holding. So in order to function as a biotensegrity, you need to keep moving. So any falling which forces you to contract in order to hold yourself, oh, I just remembered another thing. I'm not reading my notes at all. You've got the same sheet of paper that I have here, and I'm supposed to be following this, and the numbers are which slide. So, like, everybody should be going through and say, oh, he missed that. Oh, he forgot to say that. What's he doing? He's completely lost. So this is a very important point. These muscles are important. The voice of the piano, the vocal cords of the pianist, the focus there. But that contraction, which creates all that, the empowerment of the hand, has to happen in a functional way. So if I fall in and clench, then I've already... Another thing, watch me. I'm gonna contract a split second after the sound. Now I'm going to contract a split second before the sound. Okay, which of those two was louder?
The first one, I think.
Oh no.
The second one?
If I did that on the piano, the second sound would be a lot louder. But yes, this one was louder. So when you do this on the keyboard, the piano is very sensitive. The piano case feels all those vibrations and it transmits it to the soundboard and it messes up the vibration of the string. And when you move the key quicker with no falling in, then the vibration of the string will be clearer. Watch. The second one was kind of more ringing, right? And it didn't attack you, it energized you. Yeah. So there's a lot here to be said. Now, so before I was talking about maybe the old guys, they thought arm weight, but because they were so much in their biotensegrity and their spine was so movable and they were sitting like those 1907 guys were walking, that they would just do what they thought was arm weight, but it would actually be biotensegrity. And at 4 in the morning, this morning, the image came to me. It's bungee jumping. Here's the top, and here's the guy bungee jumping, and wham! And then just when he's going to hit, no, the cord pulls him back up. Anyway, we're not going to be able to hear that. I showed 3 pianists, Irina Lankova and then Nikolai Lugansky. It was a little better. So if you heard the sound, you would hear that the accompaniment notes are almost as loud as the melody note, even though she's really trying hard to voice beautifully. It's the Rachmaninoff D music. Now Nikolai Lugansky's better, but you'll still see occasionally the consolidation of the structure, the solidification of the structure instead of keeping it in a continuously moving biotensegrity state. And the third guy is a guy named Bob Logan who came to my institute last year and played the same piece. I'm really sorry about the volume. This one's, Bob is going to be a lot louder, so I have to turn it down so it doesn't blast you out. And now watch right here. You see, he's still solidifying his hand in a certain way, so he's not totally in a biotensegrity state as he's playing, although he plays beautifully. It's a beautiful performance. You should go on YouTube, and I got all these off YouTube. But this next one I did not get off of YouTube. It's, now look at the difference in the hand motions when Bob. Pretty soon. Boom, solid octave, not a growing octave. Yeah, there are many ways of using the growing octave. This is last summer at University of Massachusetts in Amherst. See, he's really walking. The arm movements are totally lateral and horizontal and supported by the body. So he's got total orchestration. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we've seen, I'm sorry that I couldn't really illustrate that with a better sound. I didn't get the sound we needed. But you see, look again, what we saw at the beginning. The tensegrity is moving things, it's not falling into things. It's establishing a kinematic chain. Ideally, the kinematic chain ripples out from the body through the piano mechanism and creates a tensegrity structure and relates to a tensegrity structure in the piano. opportunity to say one way of formulating what my institutes are aiming for is to reconstitute Chopin touch at the piano. Because it's well known, it's well documented that he did not play with arm eight. Now, he did not have this open Lisztian posture, but he constantly, every first lesson from Eidelgin, there's all sorts of details about how every first lesson was a pure torture for the student because he would spend 2 hours moving one key in this way and that way and this way. So in my 4th book called Playing the Piano with Your Whole Self, I'm actually here looking for a publisher. But you can get it online at my store. I'm not allowed to sell things here, but I can at least tell you that it's just the Word document manuscript with the illustrations and musical examples is on the online store in a PDF format. And many of the chapters have a quote from Eidelgin at the front. Because we're trying, everything, I was sort of a technical talk today with the body and this and that, but it's aiming towards an artistic aesthetic, which is very, very important. I think we have a chance to actually reconstitute that aesthetic. So many of the greats, even more recently, play with that aesthetic. Art Tatum, a couple of blind guys, Art Tatum comes to mind, and Sujuy also comes to mind. You don't see any weight in what they're doing. The common thread is replacing a weighted touch with what we can now call a biotensegrital touch. There are brochures and DVDs here, and I'm happy to continue this conversation over lunch if anybody has questions. I don't know, Gail, do we have time for a couple of questions now? Or
about 2 minutes.
Yeah, so are there any questions? Any comments? Yes?
Is this helpful if you have arthritis in your hands?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And also, if you combine it with Feldenkrais lessons, then what we're seeing is that all these hand movements that we do relate to the whole. So the more the whole body changes and develops in this direction, the more it supports the hand. Not support like this, but support. And movements become easier when they go through the entire body. Yes? Who had a hand up? Yes? Yeah.
Okay.
In the back.
I'm also a big believer in biotensegrity technique and teach my students that as well and play. And when somebody comes to you and says, "Okay, I don't believe this. I'm still a big believer in the falling down using arm weight." What are maybe this is like a summary. What would be like 3 top things that you would argue for this technique as opposed to like?
Well, what I've discovered is that fighting something head on is really useless. And you really have to join with somebody wherever they are. You have to join with each person's reality. So if I see somebody falling, I've had people come to me who had carpal tunnel, the operation simply from abusing themselves as this falling touch. Italian lady, Germany, wherever. And I won't stop them from falling. I'll say, okay, fall, but how does a cat fall? The cat's in midair. And you jump, you can fall like this, or you can fall like this. So habits are changed slowly. A person's image of themselves is not going to change overnight. You'll just alienate the person from themselves. So you have to find ways of a slight alteration in a direction which is going to serve this person. Because many times we're abusing ourselves, but we don't know it. And you can't tell somebody, you're abusing yourself, but you don't know. You won't get anywhere. There has to be a dialogue, there has to be a creative interaction where there's a real sense of understanding and perception and joining, which can then move you. But a lot of the time I'll work with sound. And this idea of walking, because it's so obvious that if you weight your touch, I'll simply ask them, how do you conceive that phrase? And then, well, are you really doing everything you could to make your conception actually sound? Everything you do sounds. That soundboard is one of the most sensitive instruments on the planet. It's unbelievably sensitive. If my left rib is a little constrained, it affects the sound. So when I become a biotensegrity entity, that affects the sound of amazing ways. But you have to join with the third person first. You can't fight, you can't get it all your heads. There's always a meeting place, and it's often an aesthetic place. And then you go from there and work on listening and enjoying the actual physical organization with the sound. Do you really hear the sound you're using? I think many people don't. I think, I've heard it. The same thing played loud instead of many times we don't hear that this one is not so hot. I've heard entire concerts played with that kind of sound in the audience. So we need to educate our aesthetic as well. So it's a long journey, it's a long conversation, but at least we have some paradigms set out. And the reason I presented Biotensegrity is because it's completely off the wall. And so it's like, oh, we can just reboot. Let's just like start from a new neutral point and start from a new point of perception of self and see what we can come up with, see what we can create. Yeah, thanks. Nice question.
Thank you, Alan. They will be available on the MTNA website.
Yeah, the handout was finished around 5 this morning, so
On
I will post this.
the MTNA.